групп, исследовательских групп, занимающихся долгосрочным будущим. Это проект, который называется Millennium Project. Он объединяет более 70 национальных узлов по всему миру, ведущих мировых футурологов из всех регионов мира. И эта сеть способна в этом плане делать прогнозы очень глубокие, долгосрочные, системные, целостные. И сам Джером уже более 40 лет работает с этими вопросами, консультируя правительства, корпорации, некоммерческие организации, Организацию Объединенных Наций по вопросам политики, науки, технологий, экологии, образования, обороны, космоса и многого другого. В общем, я думаю, что можно очень долго перечислять все заслуги Джерома, но, наверное, важнее услышать его позицию. Сегодня мы будем говорить о долгосрочном будущем человечества, как и в предыдущей сессии, и передаю слово Джерому. Спасибо.
Well, привет, good afternoon. And I'm looking forward to the translator, Chris, interrupting me at any time if I speak too quickly. Now, let me see if I can share my screen here. Let's see. Yep. Let's see. Whoop, I'm back here. Share screen. Good. Are you seeing the screen now? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Now, let me see. There are three things I want to talk about. One is the conscious technology age, which I think may characterize the next age after the knowledge age, after the information age, and when we sort of get more advanced, in the early beginnings of it are already here. Then the next is artificial general intelligence, which will be an extraordinary driving force, just as the internet has been a driving force for the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, and will continue to be a driving force. We think that artificial general intelligence will be a major driving force, but there's some positive and some negative, seriously negative and seriously positive. But we'll go through that a little bit. And then talk about the next economic age. Both communism and socialism and capitalism were early industrial age theories. And you've probably noticed that much of the world is no longer in the early industrial age. So it's sort of time for another economic approach to come forward. And we think it may be the self-actualizing economy. So those are the three things that I'll talk about. And if you understand all of those, then you can go to sleep and don't listen to the rest of the talk. Okay. Now let's see if I can get this to work properly. Why is it not advanced? Aha, okay. There's two great trends, in my judgment, that are shaping the future. The first is that humans will become cyborgs. Now, cyborg simply means humans dependent upon technology for a vital function. So when an astronaut goes into space or a cosmonaut goes into space, they are immediately a cyborg because without the technology in space, they're dead. We are increasingly miniaturizing technology and putting it on and in our bodies. And that trend is substantial. I mean, I don't see anything stopping that. The other is our built environment seems to become more conscious as we put sensors in there and artificial intelligence in there and voice recognition in there, that we will talk to our physical, like let's say I take my shirt, I go to a hotel. If I go to a hotel and I take my shirt off and put it on the bed, in the future, my shirt might say, hey, hang me up, I'll look wrinkled. So that the physical environment and the conscious environment, the whole thing becomes a continuous flow. And when those distinctions between these two become sort of meaningless, then we'll hit the conscious technology age. In the same sense that, for example, right now, when we call somebody on a telephone, or even maybe even in this medium here, We say, I'm talking to you and you're talking to me. But that's not really true, is it? We're talking to a machine, that talks to a machine, that talks to a machine, that talks to a machine, that eventually talks to some bones in your ears, talks to a membrane that goes into the brain. It's a long process. But we think and we experience direct conscious contact. We're talking to each other directly. So when civilization does that same thing between technology and consciousness, that's when we hit the conscious technology age. Now, most futurists agree that there are three previous ages, main previous ages, after the hunting and gathering and that sort of stuff. But you had the agricultural age, or the extraction age, where majority of people were involved in just making food or pulling stuff out of mines. And you can see on this chart, I've sent a copy of this presentation to Pavel, and Pavel, you can make that available to everybody. Don't worry, about any copyright stuff. But in the agricultural age, the main product was food and resources. We still have food and resources, but that's not what the majority of people are doing today. People were organized by religion. I mean, classic in Russia, it was a Russian church that organized Russia as Russia, right? And so the organizing principle of most of the world was religion. That's what controlled the power. And then wealth was determined by how much land that the king had or anybody had. And things happened in a particular place and resources, and wars were fought over location. That's why you have these castles and, controlling location. And time was cyclical in the sense that nothing new was under the sun, because nothing new was under the sun. People kept repeating and repeating. So you had to know where on the circle you were to plant and where to take the food. So everything went in a circle. Industrial age changed. The product became machines, power moved to the nation state. Religion did not disappear, but nation state is a new power. And there's a classic painting of the French Emperor Napoleon when he was supposed to receive a crown by the religious leader in Paris. He went, "Niet." He took the crown, put it on his own head, says, "I crown myself." Symbolically, that was the transition. So the church is still there, but new power is invented. Power, in human terms, is an invention. So we invent new kinds of power. Wealth became capital. Place was the factory. Wars were fought over resources. Still, some of that's happening today, unfortunately. And time became linear. Even the productions of the industrial age were linear productions, straight line. Information age was the next one. We're sort of in that transition to some degree now. And as a product becomes information and services. The power moves to corporations, and that's the argument today. Multinational corporations and nation states are having a power, but then the corporations have a new kind of power. It's a different kind of power than religious power, and it's different than nation state power. Corporate power, like for example, in the United States, Twitter fired the former president of the United States. New kind of power. So they're inventing new kinds of power. Wealth is by access. So if you and I have access to land and capital, but you have more access to people, things, and information, you're wealthier than I am. So access becomes the key to wealth. Place is the office. People still go to offices, although the pandemic is in the process of changing that a little bit. And war gets fought over perception. That's why you hear about information warfare and disinformation and all that sort of stuff going on now. Then time becomes flexible. When you go to work, when you start, when you do this, it's flexible. So time becomes more flexible. It's not a constant linear thing. Now, the next stage is my own view. Many people agree with this, but we haven't come to an agreement among all the futurists yet. So here in the conscious technology age, the product is linkage. For example, if I go to the airport en route to Moscow, the airline company might say, wait, we can't give you a boarding pass until I see you take 2 aspirin. Huh? How'd that happen? If I have intelligent clothing and it's keeping track of my blood pressure, and it communicates to a cell, a transponder, and it goes to my insurance company that's monitoring my body, insurance company might say, he's got to a certain point, he's got to take some aspirin. What is he doing right now? It's determined that I am at the airport. They send a message to the airport, to the people saying, find out what airline he's on, tell him he's got to have 2 pills, or we won't give him insurance to get on that plane. So if you can connect socks to airplane tickets, what else can you connect? So the big economic push will be, how do I connect this to that? How do I connect this to this? So just lots of stuff to connect. Now think of the human body. It is connected. But imagine if half of our body was not connected. We'd have a hard time working. And this is a little bit like civilization today. We're not quite all connected up, working properly yet. But that would be a big growth, connecting up things. Power moves to the individual. Not yet, but it's in a process. Individuals will be able to have more flexibility than corporations, just as corporations have more flexibility than nation states, and just as nation states have more flexibility than religion. The individual will be able to invent themselves in all kinds of ways on a daily basis. Corporations can't move that fast. They can move fast, but not quite that fast. The wealth becomes being. If you're boring, no one's going to want to connect to you. You're impoverished. Your life becomes boring, becomes uninteresting. But if your being is exciting, you're attracting people, and it's a lot of fun, you're more wealthy. So because if we have our basic needs all taken care of, what's next is yourself, your evolution of your mind, your excitement, your entertainment, all of that. Place becomes motion, because you can be in many places at the same time, all over the world. Where are you? War fought over identity. I don't want to get into that. People take over other people's minds and consciousness. It's a nasty sort of thing. Hopefully, we won't do this. And time becomes an invention. If I have little contact lenses that are integrating with many different parts of the internet, I might be one playing a game back in the 12th century. I might be talking with some science fiction writers about the next 1,000 years. I might be seeing in front of me what's going on. So I'm in different locations. Time, to oversimplify, time is a measure of motion, right? This watch, I don't know if I can see that right. This watch, what does it do? It measures motion. This is what it does. And as we change our motion in different ways, our sense of time becomes an invention. We don't have the linear, the flexible, it's an invention. We have different senses of time. So that's the idea of conscious technology as a generalization. Now, let me see if I can do this right. Why am I not? Aha. So this is one of the things being developed right now in various places around the world. So instead of so as the computer went to the cell phone goes to the contact lens. So you walk around and you talk to this contact lens, the contact lens zooms in, zooms out, connects to different things. It's a micro miniaturized interface for the computer. Oops, see, here we go. Keep hitting the wrong buttons here. Why am I not? Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, right. Good. Okay. Now, on this one, I personally like the interface of the eye, the skin, the clothing. But there's another guy named Elon Musk that says, let's put it in the brain. So right now, there's a company called Neuralink that's producing what's called Neuralace that will be the interface between the human brain and artificial intelligence, and then therefore the whole world. So your brain and the world becomes connected through artificial intelligence. The progress on this is extraordinary. I don't want to explain it too much, but you can do a Google search on Neuralink, There's the web link up here. And they're hiring, by the way. So if anybody wants to, the idea here is that if you can't beat artificial intelligence growth and you're worried that you'll be left behind, well, then merge with it to begin with. So as it improves, you improve. As you ask it to improve a certain way, it improves the way you'd like to go. So if you're able to do this, maybe we can evolve together. Anyway, that's why Elon Musk is inventing this, to merge with artificial intelligence so we grow together. So consciousness creates technology. I mean, technology, there's no genetic codes out there, and we invent all this, comes from our consciousness. But the technology influences our consciousness. When you're in a jungle, you have a certain awareness of what you're aware of. Consciousness can be defined simply as awareness of awareness. More philosophical stuff can be done later, but awareness of awareness. When you're with Pavel out there in space, orbiting the Earth, you're seeing a different selection of colors. The color actually looks slightly differently in space than it does underwater or on land. So as the technology moves us around, it changes our consciousness. We look through a telescope, we look through a microscope, it changes our consciousness. If you're in a factory that's polluting and a mess, it's different than in a wonderful tropical island with a spa and a nice martini in your hand. Different consciousness. The technology affects us. So we should start to think about consciousness affecting technology and improving technology to improve our consciousness. So if we can get this yin-yang properly, we can have quite a great civilization. The masters of technology we call technocrats. And they believe that technology solves problems. You know, you got this population problem, have some birth control. You got this problem with water, pressurize the salt water, etc. Many people figure we solve problems with technology. All right? Masters of consciousness, though, the mystics, they don't think that way. They think that consciousness solves problems. That's why you'll hear some people say, well, let's raise people's consciousness on the environment, and therefore we'll have a better environment. And someone else says, no. You have to get different way you make meat production, and then you'll change the environment. The answer is both are right. We have to do it together. But the trouble is there's prejudice between the mystic and the technocrat. The technocrat thinks they are superior to the mystic. The mystic says, I know we're superior to the technocrat. This is not very cool. So if we can get them in a good harmony, then I think our future will be better than if we don't. Everyone is part technocrat and part mystic. We're all a little bit of one, but we tend to be more of one than the other. So the idea of the conscious technology age is we deliberately create a harmony between consciousness and technology. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is artificial intelligence. There's 3 kinds of artificial intelligence, and these get all confused. Please, when you talk about artificial intelligence, make these distinctions, because when you read an article, it'll just say AI, and it does this, and it does that. And so, well, sometimes they're talking about narrow, sometimes they're talking about general, sometimes they're talking about super. They're not the same thing. Artificial narrow is what we have today. It's still machine learning. It's all those things people talk about, but it diagnoses cancer better and better and better and better, right? Or it drives a car better and better and better. But the AI that drives a car cannot diagnose cancer. So all the stuff people are talking about, and they have these meetings all around the world, or what do we got to do with AI? They talk about the values. This is very good. What values should there be in artificial? But they're talking about narrow, and as they should. But the issue, the important issue I'll get to, is the second part is the general intelligence. General intelligence is like us in the sense that it can address new problems that it's never seen before. When a human is confronted with a new problem, they may call their friends. Well, artificial general intelligence would make robot calls to all kinds of experts too. Or we might search the internet. Well, so can artificial general intelligence. But unlike us, artificial general intelligence can also search through all the sensor networks of the world, all the Internet of Things of the world, simultaneously, faster than we can. And then it can make patterns faster than we can. And it can go through data faster than we can, more diverse than we can. This is general intelligence. Now, artificial general intelligence in the public does not exist. And some people will tell you that it will never exist because it's too complex. However, some people who are working on it in public say it could happen in 10 years. That's why they're working on it now. Now, we don't know what's right about the future, but we can say it's 10 to never. Somewhere there's a range of possibilities about artificial general intelligence. Now, one of the issues, the big issue here, is if we don't get the initial conditions for how general intelligence gets created, then it could evolve into super intelligence beyond our control. The difference between super intelligence and general is that super sets its own goals, sets its own purpose, faster and without our ability to understand or be aware of. So how would you know when superintelligence occurs? Things would start to happen and you can't figure out why. That's how you'd know. Now, the thing is, if we don't get the initial conditions right for the transition from narrow to general, then general evolves in a way that may not be good for us. Maybe, it may not, but we don't know. The only control we have is between narrow and general. That's the only place we can intervene. Because if we don't get that right, the science fiction writers' horrible stories of artificial intelligence could be real. And we've had warnings from Hawking, famous scientists, and from Musk and from Bill Gates and from many people saying, if we invent this stuff, it could be the last thing we invent. They're talking about superintelligence. They're not talking about narrow intelligence, right? So it's good to make these three distinctions when you talk with people. Now, a lot of people worry, understandably, about technological unemployment. Artificial narrow intelligence will make predictable unemployment of truck drivers. Again, that's the linear idea. You know, how many trucks will be automated over what period of time, how many jobs. So you can predict this in a linear way. And you can plan for it. So you can say, okay, you'll be unemployed in 5 years. So you got 5 years to get retrained into something else. So you can plan for that, right? It's not a shock. You can plan for this. But artificial and general intelligence is different because it cuts across everything. You can't plan for it in the same way. And there may be different kinds of artificial general intelligence. Russia may have several versions. Japan may have several versions. Europe may have several versions. America may. It's like popcorn growing up in different ways. And how will that effect work? All over the place. Artificial general intelligence may arrive as soon as 2030 to 2050. It's plausible. We don't know if it'll happen, but it's plausible. Now, one thing to remember is your president said that whoever rules artificial intelligence rules the world. He was referring to general intelligence. China says we'll be in charge in 2030. All right. We have now a new, not arms race, but a new race. That's why I said in public. The military intelligence and military research may be closer to it than we know, or they may even have it to some degree. I don't know. I don't know the classified stuff. But in any case, the race is on. And the same thing with corporations. Alibaba and Google and the rest of them are all competing because they want to get the first artificial brain. So it's likely that it will happen a little sooner than the pessimists think. This could lead to massive unemployment if we do not begin to prepare. Now, many people say, you futurists, you don't get it right all the time. You can't say, oh, when the information age happens and the computers come in, it's going to wipe out all these people. Well, it created more jobs than it replaced. And every age created more jobs than it replaced. True. So what is different this time? Well, about 7 things are different this time. One, this acceleration and speed of change is much faster today. So when people think about change over the last 10 years, it won't be the same amount of change the next 10 years, because the things that are making the change, they are also accelerating. So if you gave a value of change of, say, 1 for the last 10 years, you really got to talk about maybe 5 or 10 for the next 10 years. Is much greater change. And now speed matters. Anybody that drives a car knows speed matters. If you drive too fast, you can lose control. Well, we're in this acceleration. So one big difference we did not have before is the speed of technological change. That's different this time. Second, we have globalization and interaction and synergies among entities. We use the word NT, Alex, by the way, for just like IT. IT means telephone communications. It means software. It means fax machines. It means hardware. All this together means IT or ICT. So it's just easier to say that than to list all the stuff. Well, we got a whole lot of technologies coming up. So all those together we're calling NT. So and the synergies among the NTs, just like your cell phone, it's got a synergies among camera, flashlight, telephone, computer. It's all this into one thing. But that happens with all of our technologies coming up. Not all, but an awful lot of them. And we call that NT. So the globalization, the interaction and synergies among NT is also a new thing. You didn't have much synergies between industrial age technologies and information age technologies. 3, the existence of a global platform, the internet, for simultaneous technology transfer with far fewer errors in the transfer than the past. I was involved in helping what was called packet switching. I don't know how that translates into Russian, but packet switching. It's a French invention originally. And that makes a packet and switches to a satellite. That's why internet's so cheap. I was involved in helping third world countries get that together, but I had to get in a jet plane and I could make a mistake. But with internet, for the next stage, you transfer information simultaneously worldwide. For technology transfers, much fast, and they don't have the errors. I might have had too much vodka the night before and make a mistake. You never know. So that makes the change universal, faster than ever before, and fewer errors. That's a big point. 4, standardization of databases and protocols. We now collaborate. Look at the pandemic. We're collaborating on genetic information simultaneously around the whole world because we have standards for database comparisons. We can do science much faster than before and globally. You know, somebody in Vladivostok may have a great idea that can be used by somebody in Helsinki. That was difficult to do before. Now it's easy. 5, plateaus or pauses of change, allowing time for individuals and cultures to adjust to changes. For example, I am looking at a device called a laptop computer. It's more or less the same as the one I had in 1992. Now, it's more powerful, it's better screen, etc., but it's still a laptop. I still fold it over and carry it. So culturally, I can adjust to the technology over time, no problem. There's not a shock. But what happens if you go from the laptop to a charge coupled device to something in your brain within a couple of months? That's hard. You don't have time to adjust. That's new. That's new. And that's something we'll have to think about ahead of time. 6, billions of empowered people in relatively democratic free markets able to initiate activities around the world. You know, you can create an internet business in one day, anywhere in the world. China, doesn't matter where you are. And that's creating new ideas, new activities. So that causes a lot of change too. That's new stuff. You know, when we were young, Pavel, or younger, we were told growing up that 2% at the most are real entrepreneurs. All the rest of us follow. Well, now that number is getting wider and wider and wider. We're even
That's what they say
people.
in Russia, in Russia currently, that we only have 2-3% of population that is capable of being entrepreneurs.
But
I
there's
think
more.
It's just a stage of development. Right. Let's say.
Correct. And that's the point here, is that number will expand and open up more and more people, because before we had, all of us had control. This is how you will be. Didn't matter whether you're in London or in Moscow. This is the culture. This is the way it'll be. Well, now that's wide open. So more and more people are able to invent things than before. And 7 machines can learn how you do what you do, and then learn to do it better than you. That is really new. So these 7 reasons are why it's different this time. So we may very well not have employment as we had it before in the future. My guess is you'll still have about 1 billion people in 2050 going to a job, having a boss, and a normal sort of thing. But the other 5 billion, we have a workforce of about 6 billion people. The number of population would be maybe 9, but the workforce, because there's older people or younger people, the workforce, the vast majority of people won't have that. They will have to invent themselves. Now, that is a big culture change. We did a report on this. We had 3 alternative scenarios. And I would really recommend you download these things and read the scenarios. They're detailed. A lot of time you'll hear futurists talk about scenarios, and they're not really scenarios. They're descriptions of a future condition. A typical hint is also, in this future, da 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 da, or in this future, da 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 da. That's an endpoint. A scenario is a story that connects the present tense to the future with cause and effect links in between. Why do I stress this? Because you learn what you don't know by writing a story. As you write a story, there's always a point. You go, I have no idea what happens next. That's important. That's how you learn what you have to do. I was just involved in writing the US scenarios for the Red Cross on the pandemic. And as I wrote about the contact tracing, I had to find out, well, how many contact tracers do you need? So I found out, well, how many are available? Oh my God, there's not enough. So I could not write a scenario saying that here's how the contact tracing will work, because it wouldn't work. It was not enough people. So then I called up the Peace Corps, who came back after the pandemic and called around. So then we said, okay, so the military can come in, the Peace Corps can come in, other volunteers. And so you start to fill up your story with plausible things. And that is a scenario. The purpose of a scenario is to find out what you don't know, that you didn't know it, but you should know it if that future is possible. That's the idea. Anyway, these scenarios are like that. Each one is 10 pages, a lot of detail to chew through. Now, scenario 3 is a self-actualizing economy. If humans were free, what is going on? What's this about? In the scenario, I explain how it evolves, and one of the key things is guaranteed income. As I tried to look at how you make guaranteed income financially sustainable, I couldn't see it. So I got a hold of the Finns that did some experiment. I got a hold of the Swiss who did some stuff, and different countries says, okay, where is what we call a cash flow projection? Money in, money out, each time period. So this way you can see, it's like when you go to a bank for a business loan, you have to show a cash flow projection. If you don't, the bank doesn't know if you can pay back the loan. How are they going to know? They know by where's the money coming in, where's it go out. It's a logical thing to do. I could not find any country on the planet that gave me a cash flow projection on guaranteed income. There are thousands of people talking about this, but not one cash flow projection have I seen. So I went, oh my God, this is the idea of the scenario. So what's one of the fine things I found out? People don't know really what they're talking about. So I had to do a little survey to find out where would the new money come from? How would it work? And what we found out was that as these new technologies come online, they'll reduce the cost per unit. So for example, if you take labor out of the production, because labor is usually the most expensive thing, you take labor out with artificial intelligence and automation, that means the unit of production and the price goes down, which means that the amount of money you have to pay somebody for guaranteed basic living is less. Not yet, but we see like a bell curve going up. The cost of living is going up, but eventually we figure by 2030 or 2035, it will start to come down. We're not there yet. Another curve that goes with this is the income. Because these new technologies will produce wealth that gets taxed, that's a new source of income. So as the wealth goes up and the cost of living goes down, it eventually crosses over and you can make guaranteed income. Why do I stress guaranteed income? We have a social contract in most of the world saying, if you go to school and you do well, you get a job and you do well, we'll give you retirement money for your old age. That's the social contract. But if we hit general intelligence 2030 or 2035, you might be thrown out. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You behaved properly with the social contract. So who owes you a living? Do we want to have societies where people are just thrown in the street? No. So if there's going to be all this new wealth, then that wealth can go to people. This not a lot of money. It's just enough so that you're not thrown in the street. Now, what this does is it frees up your mind. Because if you know you don't have to rush to get that job, you can take your time, then you might actually get something that's actually better for you. And your life would be quite different. So in this scenario, governments around the world started to study the impact of artificial general intelligence. They're not now. They're studying narrow intelligence. You look at all of the studies around the world, all of the things, and you put in a Google search or a search in those documents and put in general intelligence, and you don't find much. They're really talking about narrow. They're not anticipating. But in this scenario, speeches like this and other ones around the world get governments to say, we got to look at all three. Then they conduct research and experiments. Now, there have been research and some experiments already. And it turns out when you give people money, most of the people do not become lazy. Most of the people actually use it for something useful. People really don't want to be bored. People basically are curious. Now, as we grow up, sometimes our curiosity is pushed away, but we're basically curious. So if you're free to be curious, then you're going to be even more curious. So it will increase intelligence and the way their mind works. And schools of education start to say, hey, the brain can be improved, just like the muscle can be improved. Well, should education not only give people knowledge and make them good citizens, could education also improve the brain performance? Oh, that's an obvious thing. You show me a country that says increasing intelligence is an objective of education, and I will quote them in my future speeches. We were brought up as children. You only get so many neurons in your brain and your IQ is fixed. That's it. Turns out that's not true. The brain is much more flexible than we thought. we should, in education, teach our brains to be more intelligent, not just give it information, but improve its performance. If we do this, it'll help us because society and the world is not getting more simple. It's getting more complex. So it's going to be good if more and more people are more and more intelligent. And in this scenario also, artists and media moguls or media leaders and entertainers help to create or foster a culture of change from an employment culture to a self-actualization economy. Why is this important? Today, we see ourselves as being valuable if we have a job. And our employer says, you are an economist, or you are a chemist, or you are a songwriter. So your identity and value is dependent upon your job. But if most people eventually don't have jobs, and if they don't create something, then they will become depressed, suicidal, and angry. So we have to get people to understand, hey, it's okay if you create your own identity, your own culture, your own life, your own employment. You self-employed, you create your own activity. People are very insecure about trying to do that. You know, they're like they're naked in front of the world. I mean, if I have a job, I'm protected, I'm secure. So that's a big consciousness shift for the world. And it's going to require artists, entertainers, TV, movies, songs, plays, all kinds of things to show this transition is possible. In my own country, in the 60s and 70s, we had a, quote, cultural revolution with the hippies. And what caused that? It was the music. What caused the music? The music writers. The music writers put the values in the music that changed a lot of people's thinking in the 60s and 70s in my country. So if we want to change culture, you got to involve the artists in the culture, because culture is run by the artists. You go back 10,000 years ago, what do you find? Statues, artwork. All of the past, basically what survives is the art. Okay, now one of the things that will move this along is what we call an AI avatar. It may be called something different in the future, but right now it's AI avatar. You are slowly teaching different social media online systems who you are, what you like, what you want to do, all this. So imagine you have your own personal AI software. This is being narrow intelligence at this point. And what it does is it goes running around the internet while you're sound asleep, finding out what's cool to do, what would make you some income based upon your interests and your skills. And the next morning it wakes you up and says, I found 75,000 things that you can do tomorrow or today. Now you can't do all 75,000, so you talk with your avatar, which then means you're training and teaching your avatar to be more intelligent about which ones you want to do that are cool to do just because they're cool to do, and which ones you can do that'll earn you some income. Now, let me explain how simple that could be. Let's say I'm going to go to the Louvre in Paris. And as a tourist, I would go in and look around, have lunch, and leave. But with my AI avatar, I say, hey, I'm going to go to the Louvre next Tuesday. Anybody want to go with me with a telecommunications link? So let's say 50 people in the world sign up. And we charge them, let's say, €1. All right. As you're walking in the Louvre, it says, oh, what's that over there? So I look over there. Oh, what's it? And you read this so that you're interacting with people while you walk around the Louvre. And you have €50 now for a very nice lunch. You were going to go there anyway. And because the people are interested, you're learning a little bit about them, and so you're self-actualizing. You're creating the life that you want to lead. Okay, now, if you think some of this stuff isn't possible, I want you to tell your friends the following. You all have heard about Moore's Law. The price of the computer goes down, and the performance goes up. and this doubles every year and a half or so. And it's going a little faster than that now. Then there's also Nelson's law, which is the amount of volume that can go through the communications. It's what we call the how big a spigot, how big the plumbing, how much stuff can go, video and all it can go through. So these two things means a lot of change happens fast. Then artificial acceleration to artificial general intelligence will speed up the change. Then computational science. Computational science is you do science without a laboratory. It's basically computer simulations, which means that you can have thousands of people involved in your experiment using their computer to match up databases at no cost. So you can create a supercomputer for computer simulation and matching at no cost worldwide. That's beginning to happen right now. When we do this, this means that the scientific knowledge will start to accelerate much faster than before. Then you take all the synergies among NT, new technologies, next technologies, and all four of these things together will change what we think is possible. So one of the things that's happening is that we're having technology create like an autonomic nervous system of civilization. Just like in your body, you don't have to worry about making your heart beat. You don't have to worry about regulating your temperature. You don't have to worry about digestion. All that stuff is taken care of by your autonomic nervous system. Well, civilization is doing the same thing as a whole, which then frees up our brain. Just like when we got all this together, then the front part of our brain here was inventive and creative, and we started creating things. Same thing with civilization as a whole. Artificial general intelligence, as I mentioned, draws on many different things, and like us, can reason and can address new problems. They're not the same as us, but behaviorally, it'll seem like us in that sense. And that it will be the big change. So the difference between artificial general intelligence and narrow is almost like the difference between the fax machine and the internet. Both of them are things of IT, of information economy and all that. That's true, they're both part of it, but they're really different. And to put them together as if they're the same thing, the fax and the internet, is really quite different. That's the difference we're talking about here. The general intelligence really jumps up to change a lot of change. Superintelligence, as I mentioned, the difference is it sets its own goals. It figures out, hey, let's do something different than the humans have done. And we don't even have to tell humans. Hey, we'll just do it immediately, simultaneously, worldwide. So, as I said, if we don't get the initial conditions right, whatever right means, and that's what we've got to figure out, for artificial general intelligence, then artificial superintelligence could evolve beyond our understanding. So we humans have got to cooperate worldwide on how to do this, because let's say if one part of the world doesn't go along with the governance system, then it could create artificial general intelligence in a bad way. Now, some people say, well, wait a minute. If it's true that all these countries are competing with each other, I'm almost done.
Just flashing for a 10 minutes warning before the end of the session. If you consider giving people like 1 or 2 questions opportunity, so that will be
good. This is my last slide. So if let's say if during the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were in competition with secret weapons, but they did come to agreements on how to manage that relationship. So we have to do the same thing. Even though countries may compete about creating general intelligence, fine, but we got to come up with some agreements on how to manage that. And if we don't, we've got the problems I talked about. So we want to actually study this. And if anybody looks at this video and wants to participate in how we get this thing done, we'd like to hear from you. So that's the last slide. Now let me see if I can stop sharing here. Oh, stop sharing. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Thank you, Jerome. And yes, there are questions. And Okay, as a moderator, I wanted to ask the first question and then allow for, let's say, a couple of more questions. So I wanted to, I have many, but let me begin with one specific one. When you were talking about the transition to post-information consciousness technology age, you said that the driving power will be individual. But every example you were giving highlighted how, let's say, ecosystems of technologies and probably not single company, but alliances of companies, right, sometimes governments and so on, controlling them, are overruling choices of individuals.
Correct.
So it seems that really we cannot promise any individual to have a power in the system, because in fact, the power will be that, let's say, hybrid socio-technical systems, partially
right,
controlled by AI and partially controlled by groups of humans, but definitely not individuals.
Correct. Your transition is not smooth. Yes, it's absolutely, because we're doing the transition of we're not in the conscious technology age yet. We're in the period of the transition from the industrial to the information society, information economy, right? So the growth of power now is the corporations, as you have properly stated. When we start to get to the next stage, when people start to realize, they can say, I don't have to be dependent upon that corporation. I can switch to that corporation. And then I can switch back in 1 hour later. I can start to pick what companies I want to deal with. I have a freedom to choose. Then I can also give feedback, market feedback, and say, I want this. And if you do this, you'll get my business. But those decisions are individual, but we're not quite there yet, because people right now are overwhelmed by the mega corporations. All right. So you're right. What you're describing is reality. We haven't gotten to conscious technology yet, because individuals don't know they're free.
All right. All right. So the question will be how we actually amplify that capability of individuals, and who will be the driving force.
Yes, but there's also the other part of it. That's why I was saying some technologies will be important, like the AI avatar. If everybody has their own AI avatar, that gives them an equal, like they can create smart contracts overnight. Right. And these blockchain strengthens the individual. But we don't have all this in place yet. Right now, corporate power is still growing. No question. Correct.
Next question, I think a great question from Ivan Begunov. He says that general assumption in your lecture sounds like we can't control an entity smarter than us. Do you have a vision of any acceptable scenario of humans cohabitating, co-living on Earth with general or super intelligent artificial intelligence?
Yeah, nature. We don't understand all of how nature works. We get our food from green plants that separate hydrogen and oxygen without heat. We don't know how to do that. That's the most basic thing we're dependent upon. We don't know how that's done. We're trying to learn it in nanotechnology today, and we have not succeeded yet. So yes, nature as a whole is a general intelligence beyond us. We're learning, but we're not there. We're not there yet. But the thing is, you don't have to totally understand something to use it properly. Most people don't know how a car works, but they can drive it properly.
Okay.
But the car doesn't set its own goals yet.
Так, Владимир Стаут, пожалуйста. Давайте, может быть, попробуем даже успеть 2 вопроса.
Да, большое спасибо за лекцию, очень было интересно. Вот вопрос. Мы видели очень много концепций развития будущего мира, и для многих из них, на мой взгляд, стоп-фактором было то, что сам тип сознания человека, его ценностных представлений не менялся за последние 50 тысяч лет и не меняется. Вот как вы думаете, в описанном вами подходе, в котором возникает комбинированный искусственный интеллект человека, ну и, соответственно, искусственного интеллекта, может ли это служить фактором эволюции человеческого сознания, которая и позволит создать вот те вот миры, которые не представляются возможными, как мне кажется, для создания ныне. Спасибо большое.
Well, yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. But I want to go back to the assumption. If the simple definition of consciousness is awareness of awareness, then I would say that human consciousness has changed. I don't believe with that, the assumption. I think that the human consciousness, what it's aware of, what it is expanding is more than before. My awareness of humanity as a whole did not exist hundreds of years ago. I mean, hundreds of years ago, people believed the earth was flat. I think as you're growing up, you learn new things. You went, oh, wow, I never thought about it. Your consciousness expanded a little bit. So, but the short answer to your question is yes. Merging with technology will enhance our consciousness. That was the purpose, that little logo of the yin yang, where consciousness affects technology, technology affects consciousness. So yes, I agree, but I don't agree with the original assumption, though.
All right. Thank you. I have another question from Bogdan Plahotnikov. He says, if we anticipate general intelligence and then superintelligence, possibly, to overrun potential human creativity potential, does it mean that the last, let's say, factor of demand for human capabilities will evaporate? Does it mean like the game for humans is basically over?
Yeah. Right, but that's why it's important how we go from narrow to general. This transition, that's where we can intervene. But I agree with the question that if we just let it happen, there's no guarantee it's going to be good or bad. We don't know. So the person asking the question is quite right. That is a plausible future. That's plausible. But I don't want to have that future. So I'm interested in studying how do we make the transition from narrow to general. That's why we need a global governance system, just like we do have for the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's a global management system to manage nuclear energy. Anybody can have it in different ways, but here are the rules. We need that for the transition from narrow to general, or what your question is very possible. That's right. That's right.
All right. We are right at the point where we need to end this. I don't know if, Christine, can we ask for one more question? Is it possible? Okay, thank you. So let's hear out from Alexander Margolin, and then we have to wrap up.
Thank you. Mr. Glenn, I noticed that most of the time in your projection, you see human future as very optimistic. However, I don't think it's so easy. Like in the early part of your lecture, you mentioned Neuralink, if I remember name right. And it seems to be a tech that allows to change perception for full perception of reality for a human, which basically allows to control what he thinks, like some current media control how people think about our countries. And with not my real concern. My real concern is what if AI can do anything better than human after he repeats after human enough times and can see better ways to do it. Do even mid-balls of current humanity have a place in future, or maybe we can see superior AI as continuation of humanity.
Right. I had the pleasure of the year 1999, going into the year 2000, to write the next 1,000-year scenarios. And one of the assumptions that we made in these 1,000-year scenarios, we did 6 scenarios. One of them was what we call speciation. Speciation is you take a species and it bifurcates and trifurcates and goes into many different alternatives. I suspect there will be people who will say, I don't want to deal with any of this. I'm going to go to Dominique in the Caribbean and I want to live in nature. no genetic engineering, none of this stuff, boom. I think some people will do that. I also think it'll also be an evolution of technology into what we call nanites. This is like nanotechnology, which is actually conscious in that sense. So it's a range from natural to nanites. And we thought there'd be a whole bunch of different kinds of humans coming up in 1,000 years. Now, that's further down the road. But to get to your question, this is why, and when you say, yeah, you don't think it'll be that easy. Well, of course it's not that easy. If it was easy, I wouldn't need to talk. It is difficult. As a matter of fact, we've never had this kind of cooperation on the planet ever before. But we've never had the whole species addressing this before, because you're going to have AI going into Dominica. You're going to have the whole world. So I agree. It is not that easy. Of course, it's not that easy. But we have the means of production. Carl, are you listening? The means of production now is the internet. I mean, most of the production comes through internet. It's the factory of the information age. That internet is not owned by anyone. So we can invent through internet as never before. So yes, it's extremely difficult to get this right. And we've never been able to do something like this before. But that's why, as a futurist, my job is partly to say, this is a problem. Here's how we're going to, here's some possible ways to address it. Let's talk about it. That's where I sit. No, it's not easy. I agree.
All right. I expect, actually, I have, I think, at least 5 or 6 questions of my own, and I have to stop myself and others from taking more of your time. And we have to actually reflect on everything you said so far. So we will have another hour. It will be in Russian. So that's why I don't invite you to this exercise, because we will not have Christine with us, but we'll share results with you. Thank you very much, Jerome. It's such an exciting presentation and such a rich material for us to reflect upon. And we're looking not into the next 1,000 years, we're looking into the next 100 years, but it's still very, very decisive 100 years. So thank you very much for your contribution. There will be a lot